and welcome to the first Identity Debates in collaboration with Herman Miller. My name is Aiden Imanova, and I'm the new editor of Identity Magazine, and today I'll be acting as the moderator. And so we'll be looking at two different modes of working, individual versus collaborative, and we'll be attempting to tackle which one is more beneficial to employees across various perspectives. So with us, we have two teams. On Team Collaborative, we have Leila Youssef, who's the design director and partner at Say Studio. And we also have Toby Hall, who's the director and head of office and business space leasing at JLL. And on Team Individual, we have Oliver Baxter, who is Insight Program Manager at Herman Miller. And we also have Joyce Jajura, who is the practice leader for financial and professional services at Gensler. So I'll just run you quickly through the structure of the debate. So each team will have 3 minutes to make their opening statement, after which they will have 5 minutes to form their debates across 3 main topics. And after that, each team will again have 3 minutes to make a closing argument. And then after that, we'll open the floor up for Q&As, and then you'll have a poll to choose the winning team. Okay, so now let's get started. Okay, so I guess I have to pick who goes first. So I'll do a coin toss. Bear with me, I'm not the best at this. Ooh, okay. Oh, wait, we have to determine who's who first, right? Okay, so, okay, Team Collaborative, I guess, will be heads, and Team Individual will be tails, okay? All right, let's go again. Oh, okay. Tails. So that's Team Individual. Right, okay. Oh, and we will alternate each round, so that way no one gets the upper hand and it's all fair. Okay, so now Team Individual, you can take the floor.
All right, so first of all, welcome everybody. I will start with our opening statement. So generally, we tend to move towards the idea of our workplace requiring more and more collaborative areas, because those are the spaces that are fun, sociable, and exciting to design. Are they important? Yes, 100%. But are they more productive? Are they more efficient? Are they high performance spaces that build the foundation of a workplace? Global research steers us in the other direction, the direction of individual spaces, how they foster high performance and efficient work environments. And no, we're not just talking about your workstation. We're talking about quiet rooms, individual phone rooms, work setups that cater to individual task-based focused work. My partner and I stand in affirmation of today's resolution, that individual work settings are more important and productive than collaborative settings. To clarify, we define individual work settings as those spaces that support solo task-oriented work. My partner and I offer the following an affirmation of this resolution. 1, individual work settings are better for the environment. 2, individual work settings are better for augmenting productivity. And 3, individual work settings accommodate a more culturally diverse workforce.
Very much for that, Joyce, my learned colleague. Now, believe it or not, neither of us are naturally antagonistic individuals, but the sheer volume and wealth of literature supporting our affirmation that individual space is by far superior to collaborative, it's just immense. So as much as we would like to find a bipartisan agreement with our learned colleagues on the collaborative side, we simply have to state loud that individual is by far the most superior activity to support in the workplace. Thank you very much.
Now for the rebuttal, Team Collaborative, are you ready?
Thank you everyone for joining us today. Appreciate that it's a late Thursday afternoon, so hopefully this is an engaging conversation to be a part of. We're going to start off today with just discussing what collaborative working is. So basically, in its essence, collaborative working is about bringing team members together to pursue a common goal. And it basically does take a team to bring an idea to fruition and the efforts of many to achieve success, which is why we're going to argue that modern workspace design actually favors collaboration. It's really about individuals working, not individuals working within a group, but rather a group working as a whole. And few aspects of work are actually purely individual endeavors. So the advent of collaborative spaces actually came more with technology being more mobile today. Traditional desking formats are now making way for more space. And that's really what we're seeing within office design today. It's not just about those individual private spaces, we're talking about team environments. The future workplace, we believe, will give people agility and freedom of choice. In fact, 85% of office professionals today believe in flexible workspace design, and 82% of people believe that they have their best ideas in these spaces. And that's according to a Leasemen study. But offices still need to exist to foster a sense of community, to heighten employee engagement. And I think now, given what's been going on in the world today, I think we've seen this more than ever. We've all been working within our own environments and working on video conference, but we're losing those moments of work. A Harvard Business Review survey actually showed that employees thrived in collaborative workspaces because they felt like they were more in control of their jobs. They viewed their work as more meaningful and they felt more ingrained in a work community. And actually what we've noticed is that within 2018, collaborative workspaces in Manhattan, for example, increased by 70%. The days of cubicle farms and tiny little individual spaces are a distant memory. What we're talking about today is more open, fluid workspaces that cater to a variety of functions, and these are complete with shared spaces. So the thing that we're also basically going to argue is that two heads are better than one. A collaborative workspace pulls together talent and strength. It develops employee skills, it speeds up solutions, and it enhances employee retention and satisfaction. And the most important point is if collaboration wasn't important, then why would companies such as Pixar and Google implement it in their workspaces? If it wasn't important, then why do we even have offices?
Okay, so now let's go into our three main topics. So the first thing to consider is, when we're looking at workspaces and, ways of working, which do you think responds better to employee productivity? Okay, actually now it will be team collaborative who will respond first. So Leila, if you'd like to, and Toby.
So in terms of productivity, one of the things that we've realized really today is when you take employees out of individual environments, you put them together, it complements what they're doing, and it leads to improved productivity, efficiency, and communication. If you think about what is an organization's greatest asset, everyone will argue it's people, not person. It's the collective of people working together that makes the sum greater than the parts. And if you think about it as well, it's natural for people to work together. That's what human behavior is. That's how we're built. That's how we're designed. So some examples of this as well. One of the things that we've noticed is that, all over the past few months, we've been working in isolation. And now that we're slowly returning into the office, we've realized the difference in work and how it's changed. We've been able to collaborate working on Zoom calls, but it isn't as natural as sitting next to each other and working within an office environment. So one of the things that we've realized is that a lot of our conversations are more organic now. There's things that come up in natural conversation that you wouldn't necessarily realize just in the structure of a 1-hour Zoom call. And one of the other things as well, if you think about it, how many times have you stayed in an office and someone's working late on something and then you've gone across to help them? You're building a sense of community when you work together to do that. And then they trust you for it and you end up working together. We don't have that now as much as we're working individually now. It's harder to do that today. Working from home full-time is not practical, just as working individually full-time is not practical. Junior staff are keen to gain valuable insight from senior colleagues. So by working alongside them, they need to work next to them, not individually in a different environment and not tucked away in a desk hiding away or in a private office somewhere. And then, of course, too much remote work also creates its own set of problems, such as diminished knowledge transfer, decreased engagement, and cultural disconnect. All of this makes collaboration actually even harder. And if you ask Generation Y, the millennials, if you ask their employees today, they would all pick activity-based working as their preferred mode of layout, their preferred work. In 2013, for example, Yahoo, and things have maybe changed a little bit given the pandemic, but under normal conditions, Yahoo in 2013 actually revoked their employees' ability to work remotely. And the rationale behind it was that the best exchanges of information actually come from interactions in hallways, lobbies, and shared spaces. You can't get those moments anywhere else. You can't get that when you're isolated. You need to be together to actually have those experiences. And what we realize as well is that well-designed collaborative environments make a case that not all work is individual. A variety of settings should be presented to be able to make the most out of an office space. If you ask any CEO, how can they get their workspaces to foster innovation? They would tell you it's collaborative work environments. Remote work clearly improves individual worker productivity, and the facts are by double digits, but actually team productivity can actually increase up to 5 times with more interactive and stimulating face-to-face interactions between employees. So think about that. Have you ever been in an office and you're working on something individually? You go into a meeting room, you collaborate together, you work on something together. What you've produced as a team is inevitably going to be much better than what you've done individually on your own. And evidence supports that basically working together does actually lead to innovation. So for example, teams of inventors have more patents that are successful than those who work alone. And collaborative companies actually perform better than their peers. According to a study by MIT cited in 2013, researchers were able to predict 35% of teams' performance based on how frequently and how well they interacted with their fellow coworkers. The greater the number of in-person encounters, the more productive and effective the team's efforts were. So now I'm going to hand it over to Toby, and he's actually going to take you through some of the JLL-related research that we've worked on.
And good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see you all. So yeah, the huge shift from home working caused by COVID has led a lot of people to consider whether offices have a future. The shift hasn't been welcomed by a lot of people. It's not easy for some people. So flexibility and choice is going to be key as we move forward into the next normal. Governments are starting to loosen restrictions and return life to some sort of normality. So the immediate concern for CEOs today is how to keep employees safe and healthy. And in the short term, that's going to mean finding solutions that allow social distancing and reducing density in the workplace. And in the longer term, the forced mass working from home experiment has considered the future of the office, and that makes today's debate even more interesting, because how is that going to play out? At JLL, we've been surveying our employees regularly to understand how they're coping and what they're thinking. So what we've learned is there isn't any single answer or solution to the current workplace conundrum. Some people are concerned about working to a shared space. Some said they can't wait to get back to the office, like me. And many more fall somewhere in between. So this tells us that our employees want flexibility and choice, and it's up to us as employers to provide the right workspace to maximize our employees' productivity. And we believe strongly that that is a collaborative workspace. While some people are keen to return to the office as soon as possible, some people have enjoyed working from home, and we surveyed over 2,000 people. Half of the people said they liked having no commute. Half enjoyed having more flexible working hours, and 31% of people said that they benefited from an enhanced work-life balance. But that's not to say that they want it to last forever. At most, people want 1 or 2 days of their working week at home. So the working environment is even more important because people will be spending less time there, and they've got to get more out of it. And it's just so important for companies to get it right. Our research is saying that the importance of social interaction and being able to collaborate with colleagues is so much more important. Our people are saying that they miss the professional working environment that allows them to be fully effective. We've got to look at younger people, more junior people. They often live in smaller or in shared apartments, and that can make working from home really difficult. They're also keen to get valuable insight from working with their senior colleagues by sitting alongside them, by having that face-to-face interaction. And virtual platforms are great, and it's great to see you all here, on this WebEx call. But it would be so much better to have that conversation in person.
Toby, I'm
sorry. Have I run out of time?
Yes.
Can I have one more point? I was going to go with one more point.
Very quickly, yes.
So our head of research for Mina, Dana Salbach, she is super keen that everyone is very keen to just get more to that social interaction, and the office space in the future is going to be and focus more on a collaborative and social experience rather than just a place to work. Thank you.
Thank you, Toby. Now for team collaborative.
Individual. Team individual.
I'm so sorry. Team individual. Sorry.
I mean, let's really address the elephant in the room. Both spaces are important. So the good thing about a debate is, you know, you take one stance or the other. And if I wasn't in a debate, I would argue for the inclusion of both. But we are. So myself and my learned colleague Joyce, please let it be known that none of the statements that we make are representative of the organizations that we work for. It is purely for the subject of entertainment during this debate. So I caveat all of this with, like, it is both. But the nuances in the title for this debate is which is better, individual workspace or individual collaborative space? Because collaboration is very important, but it doesn't necessarily have to happen in a physical space, as I think we've all discovered during this COVID-19 situation. However, physical solo activity, you're kind of on your own, and wherever you're at, that is your workspace. So that can be in an office and it can be at home. And of course, there's varying degrees of productivity that can ensue between the two of them. So my assertion is that productivity is individual and a subjective measure. Therefore, only spaces that are designed to support individual work really truly support productivity. It was Frederick Taylor that really coined this saying of productivity, and Henry Ford back in the onset of the 20th century, to really help specifically manage people to get the most out of the individual, right? So the individual is inherently linked to the terminology of productivity from its roots. And collaboration, you've got to remember, is only a relatively new term that we started to use in the last 40, maybe 50 years. Before then, it was about individual solo activity, because that's what you were measured on. What was your output measure? How much could you produce in a given day? And that's where the term productivity came from. So, as I said, productivity is defined as the rate of output per unit input, whereas collaboration is simply the action of working together with someone to produce something. You know, it could be an idea. So at Herman Miller, we have a saying that you plus me equals 3. So me working with yourself, we produce something, whether that's a piece of work or a piece of knowledge. But it doesn't say anything about it being physically located. And remember, the nuance of the terminology of this debate is which is better, individual workspace or collaborative workspace. So given, which one would you prefer, right? So the evidence that supports this comes from, again, another statistic that was quoted by my learned colleague, Layla, from the Leasemen 2018 report, or the debrief, if you call it. Now, the Leasemen Index, let me give you a bit of background. They have surveyed over 700,000 respondents from 4,500 companies in just shy of 100 countries, and it's in actually 37 languages. So what they've done is they've measured people's perceived productivity against some real estate assets. So basically like an X-ray of your facility and whether it supports people's productivity or performance or not. It is the largest data in the world of its kind. Gallup is very similar, but it doesn't look into the real estate element itself. So in their 2018 report, they also ranked the companies in terms of the highest performing and the lowest performing companies in the world. So out of these 4,500 organizations, 700,000 respondents, you've got the top 20%, which they call the Leasemen Plus. And the debrief showed that focus work was the foundation of productivity agreement amongst the Leasemen Plus group. And it appeared to be a risk in overbaking collaboration to the expense of focused work. That was the main quote that came out of that brief. There is a risk of overbaking collaboration at the expense of focused work. Because I even today have clients now asking me, and I could name one if it wasn't for confidentiality, they're asking me to dedicate 80% of their floor plan to collaborative or ancillary or lifestyle space, whatever you want to call it. But that's overbaking the floor plan. The most important is individual work, and we will hit repeatedly, time after time, why that is significantly more important, supporting individual work in individual workspaces over collaborative work in collaborative work spaces.
Our research team is one of our fastest growing practice areas. And so what we're doing is we're constantly developing new ways to sort of survey the work environment. And according to our workplace survey, 45% of people work alone in the workplace, and only 30% collaborate in person. And they prefer to do so within a quiet space. So we're not here talking only about kind of cubicles or your workstation. We're also talking about what types of quiet spaces we can develop for people to kind of come in and do focused work. because this largely aligns with what they stated their preferences to be. They prefer to be in open environments with on-demand private space to support individual focused work. But very few people say that they prefer to work in a totally private environment. That's one thing to kind of keep in mind. And when we talk about amenities and alternative work setups and what's kind of important to invest your time, your money and your time in, amenities that deliver the greatest impact and are connected directly to people's needs and their preferences. And those spaces are directly connected to quiet zones where people can perform focused or individual work. Amenities with non-work focus, such as lounges and break rooms, deliver actually the smallest performance gains. And the key takeaway here is work-focused amenities that align with direct needs have the most value. And how does this kind of translate locally to us? So in the Middle East, workplaces are actually succeeding our global regions, both from effectiveness and from functionality, because here we create a culture of transparency. And so the Middle East, in that sense, is outperforming its global peers. And one driver of this success of high productivity is directly linked to task-based individual workspaces. And this also links us to high innovation scores, because innovation is linked to performance and productivity. All of these items kind of operate in tandem with each other. And obviously, as I just mentioned, the Middle East workplaces that have high performance and effectiveness also score high on our innovation index.
Okay, so now moving on to our second point, looking at various cultures across the globe, I mean, it's clear that different parts of the world respond differently to different work setups and environments. So from a cultural perspective, is it individual or is it collaborative spaces that satisfy more diverse ways of working? I think team individual, you take the floor now, and then we'll pass it on to team collaborative. So, yeah.
My assertion really is that collaborative spaces are less important in the GCC. And my reasoning for that assertion came when I kind of rather mistakenly, having worked in London for 5 years for Herman Miller, came over to the Middle East about 5 years ago, started working with clients. And at that point in time, I had a particularly interesting piece of research called The Psychology of Collaboration. And I was talking to lots of different clients about it. And I remember when I first went to Saudi and I was talking to a group of Saudi locals there about the psychology of collaboration. I have to provide different collaborative settings in the floor plan to allow people to interact, which breeds trust and community, and therefore enables them to collaborate later on. And the gentleman looked at me and said, "This is very interesting research, Habibi, but please know that here it's different." Now, I hear that everywhere I go, that there's something different, and for the most part, it's not really the case. But in this instance, he followed up with, you have to realize that just before and just after prayer, this is where we interact with one another and where we collaborate. And when we go back to our desks, that's when the heads down focused, uninterrupted work occurs. So I realized right then and there, as a fresh-faced Londoner to Dubai, that I was very much mistaken in taking my, generic views of research and applying it to a market and Muslim faith and prayer. It is very, very different in that instance. We also have to take into account that the GCC in particular is much more hierarchical than other regions around the world. It's significantly more top-down decision-making. So therefore, you don't require so much collaborative thought to make a decision. You don't have to get as many key stakeholders together because it's usually one or two people at the top that makes the decision down. Now, that's not my belief. The evidence from that comes from Erin Meyer's book called The Culture Map. And she kind of determined the difference and similarities between different cultures around the world. She highlights that Saudi, Korea, and China and Russia are all heavily weighted towards the top-down decision-making culture, which means the decisions are made, as I said, by one person. Therefore, collaboration between employees is less important in these regions when compared to Japan and Sweden, who are the polar opposites, where it is much more of a collaborative society. Everybody's opinion needs to be heard before a decision can be made. So here locally in the GCC, this is probably the worst place to try and have a debate where you're trying to encourage the need for collaborative spaces and collaborative decision making, because it is not necessarily a democratized culture as it might be in other regions around the world. So I think this, again, is for the assumption that the GCC is, very much a hierarchical top-down decision-making country, and the individual workspace is definitely the preference.
And just to kind of add on to that, when we look at creating a great workspace, obviously we have to align space, we have to align culture and interaction and behavior. But within culture, we have to look at items such as the mission, empowerment, awareness, and innovation. And it's important to look at the region that we live in to see how we work is influenced by regional leadership, as Oliver mentioned, and the culture of things. And I know this is something a lot of us are sort of steering away from. Although due to the culture of the region, we find that there's an abundance of private offices that are driving high performance spaces, and they're hindering collaboration. And workplaces in the Middle East are comparatively private. Over 1/3 of all individual workspaces are private offices, according to our workplace, Middle East workplace survey that was just released this year. And compared to the region's global peers, in the US, that's 37%, for example. The Middle East rivals kind of this share of private offices. And half of individual workspaces in the US and in the UK are totally open, while only 25% of individuals in the Middle East use totally open environments. And for example, interestingly, when we're looking at workers who have a private office, they also rate meeting rooms higher because they indicate that they'd be less attuned to whether these workspaces provide quality opportunities to work alone or work with other people.
If I might just add to that, is that collaboration, we understand it can be done digitally. It doesn't require a physical space. However, individual work activities fundamentally does. Case in point is EXP Realty. Realty? I'm pronouncing that right. In the States, is over a $610 million real estate company. And it doesn't have an office for its 13,000 agents and staff. Instead, everybody just works from like a completely virtual island. So, we really don't need a physical workplace to collaborate in. It can be done digitally.
Thank you, Olive, for that. Now over to Team Collaborative. Do you have your rebuttal ready?
I'm actually going to start off and completely disagree with the last thing that Holly just said. I think it really depends on what your work function is, and it depends on the type of work that's happening in that environment. I would argue that there's quite a lot of companies that really wouldn't succeed without being able to sit next to each other and collaborate face to face. And actually, our industry is probably one of the most, the best examples of that. So we've had the experience now over the last couple of months of actually designing remotely. So I'm designing from my computer, my colleague is on a different computer. I have to tell you that the results, I think, are always much better when you're sitting next to someone and you can see what you're looking at together. So the first part, I would argue with Ollie on that point. But the other thing that I wanted to say is that I think when you look at around the world globally, one of the things that you'd find is that basically the attitudes towards personal space differ from country to country. So every environment is completely different. So in Germany, for example, you have actually larger footprints for space. You've got like 320 square foot per person. And then the Americans would do like around 190. But in India, I'm just reading what Pallavi wrote as well. Sorry, I got distracted. But in India, it's 70 square feet per person, and China's 50. But yet India and China would argue that their work environments, they would rate them highly in terms of their ability to concentrate and work without disruption. So what does this actually mean? It means that it's about flexibility. It's about lots of different environments. It's about giving people choice. So across cultures, 98% of the most highly engaged employees report that they had the ability to concentrate easily because they had the ability to control their own environment, a result of flexible office design that gives people choice. You have to also appreciate there's different personalities in an office. Some people, prefer those environments, and some people prefer more private environments or whatever the situation is. But the point is that you need to have a mix of these environments. And maybe what we're learning today is, I would argue the opposite to what Ollie said. I think individual work is best suited at home in a private setting, working remotely, and collaborative work is best suited in an office. An office, its fundamental value is the idea of bringing people together. So environments that do that are really what showcase the point of this whole thing. So the other thing is that people in individualistic societies, such as the US, or Australia, UK, they tend to emphasize individual rights such as freedom, privacy, autonomy, but collective societies, which is like Latin America, Asian countries, the Middle East, for example, were much more interconnected. So Ollie also drew on this anecdotal evidence from over 5 years ago when he first came to Dubai. I would argue as well that things have changed quite a lot in that time period. Yes, there's probably more of a preference towards individual spaces within this region here, but things I think are really changing here. Things are not the same today as they were 5 years ago when that happened. So the argument there is that although the Middle East society is more collectivistic society, they prefer the individual spaces because of privacy. If you hear the conversations about it, it's about protecting the women, for example. They don't want them, sitting next to a man, so the spaces are more divided for those sorts of reasons. But if you think about it as well, how they work together, their work formats are actually more collaborative. I would argue that work formats here are more collaborative. And most of the companies that we've designed for probably have more meetings than other companies. And those meetings are actually in larger groups. There's more people within those meetings than more of the Western companies. And I think that is because of the collaboration between them. This is because of the culture and how we like to bond together, basically. And it's because we're more of a collectivistic society. So I just wanted to actually ask Toby. Toby, would you like to carry on from that?
In the last few years, I joined JLL in 2012 out here. We had a pretty cellular office when I first joined. It wasn't very inspiring. They redid it a few years ago, and the results are, we are way more productive. And the team that we have in Dubai is our most diverse office across the whole world. In my own team, we've got over 15 different nationalities. So it's really interesting to see that. We're chatting to our project management team and to Juliana Porter. She's working with a company at the moment, a local company. It's about 900 people. They're currently about 50-50 in terms of individual offices versus collaboration space or open, what they would call open plan space, and they really want to shift that balance. This is a local company, way more towards having collaboration space, which is really interesting because it shows what's happening in the market. We did a survey in 2016. I was involved, so on the board of MICO with the RICS, and that survey looked at the effect of design on productivity, and it was a locally based project. All of the Generation Y employees said that activity-based working was their most preferred office layout. There was still a huge amount of demand and feedback from that survey that said that the single office was still being used. But I think we've come a long way, as Leila said, in the last 4 years.
Thank you. Thanks, Toby. Okay, so now for our last point. We're looking at workspaces from an environmental perspective. Would you say collaborative or individual spaces are more sustainable modes of working? So Toby, I don't know if you want to take it from here or Leila?
The whole thing is about efficiency. Everything is about efficiency when it comes to environmentally friendly design. So the thinking behind that is that basically open and collaborative work environments are more sustainable because there's a smaller footprint for a higher number of workstations. So what's actually the most inefficient space is when you give everyone one-to-one desking. Now remember, we agree with Ollie and Joyce in that we're not arguing 100% completely against individual workspaces. We still do believe that there is a place for them, but we actually believe that collaborative working within an office environment defeats the point of having an office if you don't use it. You need to have it there in order to have the office. That's the heart of the office, is collaborative working. So what we would propose then basically is that individual working still exists, but it's on a smaller ratio, and collaborative working is really what is mostly featured within offices. Because if you think about it, individual work environments that use a one-to-one desking ratio, first of all, very inefficient. Second of all, never 100% utilized. And the reason is because you've either got too many people in the office or not enough. You never get the number right. You can never forecast exactly what your office capacity will be. So this type of planning actually is the most, it limits the amount of flexibility, as I said, because as companies grow or downsize, that means that you don't have the right number of desks. And so the space, when it's designed, if you think from an MEP perspective, the HVAC, the power, everything that goes into that space, the number is never right if you're doing it one-to-one. So it's never going to be efficient. If we consider then what offices might evolve to post-COVID, we actually think that there will be a hybrid model that might come out of all of this. And that would be that your individual workspace can be anywhere, but doesn't always have to be within an office. Offices should really focus a little bit more on collaborative environments now, because like I said, that's the point of an office. So that sort of hybrid environment then potentially would reduce the amount of travel, reduce the size of the office, and you're actually designing to fit rather than over designing for a one-to-one ratio. And then Ollie also argued for offices that have more individual spaces, but actually maybe we have learned that the individual workspaces are, as I said, best suited at home. And offices really are more about the collaborative work. And now today, through this whole experience, we've removed the stigma that you need to be in an office. I think that was the problem as well. The reason why we'd included so many individual office and individual space environments within an office was because there was this stigma that you have to be in an office to do any sort of work. You can now do that from wherever you want. I think we've removed the stigma having gone through this experience, but an office really then should be about bringing the people together, bringing that sense of community together.
Thank you, Leila. Yeah, so I wanted to focus on, the workspace and, the healthy workspace, which promotes, productivity. And that's a wider building. That's not just a workspace. You could have the best designed workspace in the world. It could be collaborative or individual, but if the building isn't right, if the employee journey from the moment they arrive at the building, when they land, and then they transfer through the building in the lift and get to their space is wrong. So there's a huge impact on that. I wanted to draw you to some JLR research, which is called the 330-300 rule. I'm sure you've heard of it. If you haven't, I'll run through it very quickly. So this is costs that are incurred by companies: $3 for utilities, $30 for rent, $300 for payroll and staff. Now, that's going to obviously vary across different organizations, but it's a solid rule of thumb. If you get a 10% increase in energy efficiency, that's going to yield 30-cent savings per square foot. A 10% decrease in rent is going to save you $3, and a 10% gain in productivity is worth $30. So it's a massive shift, and the productivity of the staff is based on the workplace. So yeah, sustainable billings is coming. The drive for that is coming squarely from tenants, and a lot of tenants have signed up to promote that. 900 corporates have signed up for science-based targets to reduce their carbon emissions. And we did an investor survey in 2019. Only 7% of companies said that they identify climate change and sustainability. Whereas now that's, in January 2020, that's moved to 70%. So basically for us, it's the global war on talent, and that's driven corporates to increasingly consider the human experience and staff well-being as major factors in the design of their workspace.
Now for team individual, Oliver and Joyce.
All right. On the working from home situation that everyone has been talking about, it's kind of the elephant in the room. So yes, we have realized that a lot of people are comfortable working from home, they're productive working from home, but we also realize that when they go back to the office, they're not comfortable sharing workstations either. So people are not, I understand, I mean, we're all moving towards kind of flexibility and sharing ratios, but as of this moment, and as this kind of pandemic is still going on, and in the near future, people are not going to be comfortable sharing workstations. So people will literally expect to arrive to kind of their assigned workstation when they do work in the office. And when we look at collaborative spaces, those are spaces that are constantly changing. So we have open spaces, closed spaces, war rooms, project rooms. We want that cool digital whiteboard TV that connects to the iPad that all the other offices are using. So this is all really amazing stuff, but it's directly connected to which team is using the space, how they want to use it. And as times change, all of this technology is changing. And it's not very sustainable to constantly be updating all of these collaborative spaces to adapt to kind of the latest technology and the latest trends, basically. And so for the most effective collaboration space, it's important to constantly be making these updates. And then the question would be, how long is that sustainable for?
Yes, and to reiterate, the soft furnishings, the warranty on those materials, industry averages around 3 to 5 years, whereas the individual solo workstations, I mean, at least if you come to Herman Miller, it's a 12-year warranty. So from that point of view, it's significantly more sustainable to focus on individual desks. See how I got that in there? Okay, so a little bit more reasoning. Layla talked about kind of offices, but again, this is broader than just offices. This is workstations, right? This is workspaces. So that can be, as I've said many times, it can be at home, it can be office, it can be coffee shops, it can be lobbies of hotels. It really can be anywhere. So I think it's important to remember that working from an individual workspace at home reduces the environmental impact and is essential for an environmentally friendly, corporate responsible organization. So the reasoning for that is that carbon emissions expelled during the average commute time is contributing towards global warming the world over. I'd like to draw on the evidence from Gallup's 2019 survey that highlights that 34% of office workers spend more than an hour commuting to the office. 34% of us are spending more than an hour trying to get to the office. And let me give you a couple of case studies here. Sun Microsystems, they permitted 24,000 of their American employees to work from home, which prevented the release of 32 metric tons of carbon dioxide into the environment that year. If we look at Xerox in 2015, they reported that their remote workers drove 92 million fewer miles, which reduced carbon dioxide emissions by nearly 21 metric tons. Also, when you're working from home, not only are you saving on those gas miles trying to get to the office and a bit of your sanity by not being stuck in traffic, it also reduces paper consumption, so less deforestation whilst working from home because we typically don't print as many things off. Now, if you are, if you're a human on this planet, this is really important for attraction and retention of organizations, because we're all seeking to align ourselves with organizations that are more environmentally conscious. But again, from Gallup's report on looking at generations and specifically here, it revealed that 21% of millennials said that they would change jobs in the past year to find one that more closely aligned with their values around sustainability. So I think that's really interesting, that working from home is better for the environment than commuting to the office. It's also better for performance, according to a lot of Leasemen data, but I'll leave that to my closing argument.
Okay, so when everyone is done with their closing arguments, we're going to open the floor for Q&As. And while we're doing that, we'll also open the polls to save time. And once we're done with the Q&As, we'll just reveal the results to everyone.
So Toby used the example of his cellular office and how they progressed from that. I just want to go back to our original statement that supporting individual work is supporting more than just a workstation. It is quiet pods, it's a plethora of different spaces around the office that can help you accomplish work. And Layla said that some people can't work from home. And anecdotally, again, I've heard lots of my colleagues in the architecture and design community saying they're going to have to close their doors because it's such a collaborative business. And I don't deny that. But I think if we've learned anything through the COVID situation is that we can actually work in a digital fashion. We can work from these solo individual spaces and connect digitally with our colleagues. Is it just as good? Absolutely not. But is it sufficient at this time? Yes, and we're able to deal with that. So, it really is about, just highlighting that Leasemen research, that actually their data of working from home in comparison to working in the office. Now, the difference is that they had 700,000 respondents for the office data set and only 10,000 for the working from home because they've only been doing the data for 6 to 8 weeks. But it did highlight that the average improvement across the board was 19% in productivity for working from home in comparison to working in the office. Now, that's not in every element of working. So some things like learning from others, weren't as effective, when working from home, or hosting visitors obviously wasn't quite as effective. And just to kind of draw upon another piece of Leasemen research, and this is really the one that hits home for anyone who's still on the fence. is that when they ranked all the activities that people do and asked them which were the most important, out of these 700,000 respondents from working from home, they've been doing this over the last 10 years, guess what they ranked number one? Individual focused work is the number one importance for every single employee for the most part. When I say for the most part, I mean there's a dramatic difference between number one and number two. But guess what? Collaboration didn't come in at number two. Collaboration, according to the 700,000 populace, came in at number 6. And I don't know if you know too much about statistics, but there's something called an F-stat. And the difference in an F-stat is, to put it very crudely, is the difference between a tap and a punch. So the F-stat for the number one ranked employee linked to productivity, individual work setting, is 135. All the way down at number 6 for collaboration, the F-stat is 18. So there's a dramatic difference in that. So I think we really need to focus on the individual work above the collaborative. It's almost like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that triangle of self-actualization, trying to get to the top so we can all be successful. Yes, collaboration is one of those stepping ladders, but guess what? Individual focused work support is a basic one. It's the foundation. Without that, collaboration is redundant. Again, the Leasemen did another survey where they looked at some of their workplaces that they class as obstructors. So they didn't support people working in them. Then there were enablers, and then there were catalysts. And guess what? Catalysts was a combination of individual and collaborative work being supported. Obstructors was either organizations that didn't support either collaboration or individual work, or another obstructor is workplaces that just support collaboration. So the Leasemen again identified that workplaces that just support collaboration are obstructors. You need to be able to focus on the foundation layer, which is the individual work. Only then can you start to layer on other spaces like collaboration. So go back to the main premise of this debate. Which is more important, individual or collaborative workspace? I think it is apparent from all the research that both myself and Joyce have presented to you that individual workspace is by far the most important and foundational. Which is the most important for you and your productivity? Individual workspace or collaborative workspace? Hop in the chat box and let's see.
That's it. Okay, time's up. Okay, we're really running out of time now. So team collaborative.
Thank you, Oliver. Good arguments, but it doesn't work for me. For me, the objective of a collaborative workspace is to bring team members together in pursuit of a common goal. And even if individuals play different roles, the workspace they share should accommodate their contributions. Cooperation is at the root of collaboration. Employees who cooperate can work together regardless of the objectives and all the obstacles which will come upon them. Designed right, collaborative spaces offer businesses a plethora of benefits. The obvious is the ability for teams to work side by side in an environment designed to improve productivity, efficiency, and communication. Taking employees out of individual office spaces and putting them together in a space naturally complements the work that they're already doing. Proximity and positive group dynamic of a collaborative workspace goes way beyond pure work benefits. There's the socialization to consider. Collaborative spaces take the water cooler out of play, which encourages employees to socialize with their groups. Instead of taking time out of work to socialize, this interaction becomes part of the work itself. Camaraderie and culture also benefit. Talking about the season finale of the latest Netflix show or the latest news headlines creates common ground for co-workers, spawning everything from inside jokes to friendships outside of work. And when the going gets tough, everyone is in the trenches together, putting in long hours and working side by side. Every day, every week, the group grows closer together, promoting a tight-knit company culture. The collaborative workspace for me and for Layla and our team is the setting for these benefits. It marks an important shift from individuals working within a group, to working as one. So it's COVID-19 is forcing us all to change and evaluate how we do things. And we're sure that there's going to be people working from home in the future compared to before the pandemic. That might lead to smaller office footprints for some companies, and bigger for others, you know, who are going to need more space to accommodate the new workplace strategies that come out of this. But instead of a we versus I, we need to implement a balanced office with the right typology of spaces based on each individual company's requirements, you know, and that will be looked at during the workplace strategy. The office is definitely here to stay in a collaborative form, we believe. The form and function will evolve, as it always has done. And we believe that that will be a combination, but with a much more larger percentage and proportion of collaborative space. And we hope you make the right vote in the poll. I hope Leila and I have put forward our argument. And Leila and Joyce, you did a great job. But thanks for coming.
Thank you to both the teams for extremely strong arguments. I don't know how people are going to be choosing, but Bertie, can we please open the polls up now? So once the polls are open, you guys can choose your team. And I think while we're doing that, if anyone has any questions they'd like to open up to our debate teams, please feel free to write them down in the chat box.
I saw a good question by Pallavi around mental health. And I'd like to address that because she is right, and she has a very particular set of circumstances which makes it a little bit more difficult for her, being a business owner and a mother and doing homeschooling. It is different for everybody, but you've got to remember, like, we're talking about, you know, collaboration versus it. We're not talking about COVID quarantine. So COVID quarantine is a very specific set of circumstances where we're all forced into lockdown. We can't see absolutely anybody. You know, this is a very small blip in time. When we come out of this, we'll have the option to collaborate when we want to and to work on our individual work at the same time. But I completely get where she's coming from. I mean, my situation is a lot less than ideal. I've been doing this WebEx webinar using my changing table as a standing height desk. I've got a ball pit right there and a bouncy thing right here, so I can kind of relate. But yeah, mental health is a separate issue to the individual versus collaborative workspace debate. It is taking into the COVID realms, but I completely get where she's coming from. Okay, you're struggling with the live. I'll try and make the poll live, Bertie. Hold on one sec. Sorry, apologies everybody. Give me 1 moment.
Focus on the polls now.
Are the polls open?
Pallavi Dean, she's given us the vote.
Okay.
Anyone have any?
There we go. The polls are open.
Okay. Can I vote too?
Of course you can.
Oh.
So the polls are open for 2 minutes.
No, I won't vote. I can't be true.
Why don't you tell us what you thought?
No, I'm not.
You don't want to swing the vote.
Honestly, both the arguments were extremely strong, and you guys really did your homework. Actually, I'm really impressed.
Were there any questions in the chat that we've missed?
Sorry?
Were there any questions in the chat that we've missed?
Just so one. From FA, there's a big shift towards decentralization of offices here in Melbourne in post-COVID era, resulting in satellite offices with smaller floor plates. What kind of challenges would these pose to the new design?
Sorry, we just have 1 minute left and there's still 18 people yet to vote, and it is so close, it's untrue.
You can see there is okay. Can everyone please vote? I think there are 18 people who have not voted yet, so please. And
I think that's a good question, Aidan. You know, I'll let one of the design guys take it, but you know, we're definitely having these conversations about satellite offices. You know, people don't necessarily want to commute all the way to work, and so having an office that's nearby, maybe you don't want to be in Oliver Baxter's ball pit or on his baby changing table, but you need to go 10 minutes to make a call, to have a meeting, to be able to focus without the dogs barking or the kids, you know, or your wife asking you to do the washing up.
Sorry, 15 seconds, 14 people left to vote.
I'll let the designers jump in if they've got a thought on that.
10 seconds, still 14 people haven't voted. Come on, get them in there. It's so close, it's untrue. Get those votes in. 13 people left. All right, that's it. The polls are closed. It's calculated. All right, so here are the results. I can't believe how close this was. Well done, Team Collaborative. Well done, guys. Nice.
Good job, guys. Good
Well
job.
done, guys.
Well done. It was really close, though.
That was so close. And I wasn't able to vote because I posted the poll. So, you know, it could have
Oh,
That one
Big
vote
enough difference there in
would have made
numbers.
a big difference.
Your one vote didn't count.
been. That was fantastic. That was so fun, everybody.
You guys, thank you so much for really engaging debate. Both teams did amazing. Thank you so much, and we learned so much. And actually, a lot of people were kind of commenting as well, saying, you know, where they can sort of access this information. So, I mean, after this, I don't know if anyone wants to get in touch to kind of learn more. I think we'll also try to have a story about the supplement identity as well with some of the stats. So you can always go to our website as well to, you know, if you need any of the information. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you to the amazing debate teams. You guys were great.